She slammed her last asset onto the auction table, and instead of saving her home, she pointed at two wild horses no one else wanted. The room fell silent as the gavel hovered midair, unsure what to do with a choice that made no sense. Outside, the horses pulled hard against their ropes, not to escape, but toward a road she hadn't walked in years. Something there was calling them back. The gavel didn't fall. It hovered, caught in the auctioneer's trembling hand, while every pair of eyes in the room locked onto the woman standing near the front row. Clara Whitaker didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The weight of what she had just done hung heavier than any shout. Outside, beyond the warped wooden doors, a restless thud echoed, hooves against metal. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, are you certain? This is the final lot. Once it's gone—" "I know what it is," Clara said, her voice flat, worn thin from years of saying less than she felt. She didn't look at him. Her gaze stayed fixed on the sliver of daylight leaking through the doorframe. A murmur rippled through the room. People shifted in their seats, whispering into sleeves, exchanging glances that carried judgment more than curiosity. They had come expecting a simple end, a bankrupt farmer, losing what little she had left. They had not come for whatever this was. Caleb Turner leaned against the back wall, arms folded, the hint of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He had been waiting for this moment for months. The house, the land, the final signature, clean, quiet, inevitable. Now something in that rhythm had broken, and he didn't like it. "You're passing on your own home," he said, stepping forward just enough to be heard. "For 2 unbroken Mustangs? That's not a trade, Clara, that's surrender." She turned her head slightly, just enough for her eyes to meet his. There was no anger in them. That unsettled him more than if she had shouted. "It's not a trade," she replied, "and it's not yours to measure." The auctioneer shifted, uncertain. Then the house proceeds to the next bidder. The gavel came down this time, sharp, final, a hollow sound, like something closing that would never open again. Clara didn't flinch. Instead, she moved. The doors creaked as she pushed them open, a gust of dry wind sweeping dust across the threshold. Outside, the afternoon light lay low over the land, stretched thin across fields that had long since stopped yielding anything but stubborn grass and old memories. The horses saw her immediately. They weren't quiet, they weren't calm. The darker one struck the side of the trailer with a force that made the metal ring. The lighter one circled tight, rope pulled taut, head high, not panicked, not wild in the way most would call it. There was direction in it, purpose. Clara stepped closer, boots sinking slightly into the dirt. She didn't reach out, not yet. "Easy," the handler muttered, tightening his grip. "These two haven't settled since we loaded them. Something's got them worked up." Clara didn't answer. She was watching the way their bodies angled, not toward the open field, not toward the road leading away from town. North, always north. The darker horse stamped, then jerked its head hard, rope scraping against the post. The lighter one followed, pulling in the same direction, muscles straining, not to break free, but to go somewhere. Clara felt it then. Not memory, not exactly. Something older than that. A place she had trained herself not to think about. "Where'd you pick them up?" she asked quietly. "Out past the ridge," the handler said. "Old grazing land. Nothing left out there now." Nothing left. Clara's fingers curled slightly at her sides. The horses pulled again, stronger this time. The rope groaned. Behind her, the auction house doors creaked open, voices spilling out, questions, disbelief, the low hum of people trying to make sense of something that didn't fit. Clara didn't turn back. She stepped forward, closer to the horses now, close enough to see the dust caught in their coats, the lines of strain along their flanks, the sharp awareness in their eyes. They weren't trying to run. They were trying to return. She swallowed once, slow, as if forcing something down. Then, without another word, she reached for the rope. "Untie them," she said. The handler blinked. "Ma'am?" "Untie them," Clara repeated, her voice steady now, but quieter, like a decision already made long before this moment. He hesitated, glancing back toward the building, toward the men who still thought this was about money. Then he loosened the knot. The rope slackened. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then both horses shifted at once, heads lifting, bodies turning, not toward escape, but toward that same distant line beyond the fields, north. Clara took a step after them, just one. And for the first time in years, she didn't stop herself. "Show me," she whispered under her breath, not sure if she was speaking to them or to something she had buried long ago. The wind moved across the land, carrying the faint scent of dry grass and something colder beneath it. And the horses began to walk. Clara followed. She didn't look back at the house that was no longer hers. She didn't listen to the voices calling her name. Because somewhere ahead, beyond the broken fences and forgotten ground, something was waiting, and she already knew it wasn't going to forgive her easily. The sound of the auction faded quickly behind them, swallowed by the open land. Clara didn't rush. She walked a few paces behind, letting the horses choose their path. The ropes hung loose now, brushing against their legs as they moved, not leading, not restraining, just trailing like something unnecessary. The northern field had been left alone for years. Grass grew uneven there, brittle and pale in some patches, stubbornly green in others. Fence posts leaned at tired angles, wires sagging or snapped entirely, half buried in dirt and time. No one farmed this side anymore. No one had reason to, except now. The darker horse slowed first. Its ears flicked forward, then back, testing the silence. The lighter one stepped closer to it, their bodies aligning without effort, as if they had done this 1,000 times before. Then both turned, not randomly, not searching, but toward a narrow break in the old fence line. Clara felt her breath catch. That opening hadn't been there before. Or maybe it had. Maybe she had just stopped seeing it. "Where are you taking me?" she murmured, though she didn't expect an answer. Behind her, boots crunched against gravel. Miss Whitaker! Clara didn't turn right away. She already knew who it was. Mia stepped closer, a worn denim jacket pulled tight against the wind. She had that look again, the one that hovered somewhere between concern and disbelief. "I figured you wouldn't go home," Mia said, "so I followed." Clara let out a quiet breath. There's no home to go back to. Mia hesitated at that, her eyes shifting briefly toward the horizon, then back to the horses. "They're not acting like anything I've seen before," she said. "They're not spooked. They're fixed on something." Clara nodded once. "I see it. Then why follow them?" That question lingered longer than it should have. Clara stepped through the broken fence, boots pressing into soil that hadn't been turned in years. The air felt different here, drier, thinner somehow, like it carried less of the present and more of something that refused to leave. "Because they know where they're going," she said at last. Mia frowned slightly. "And you don't?" Clara didn't answer. Ahead, the horses moved deeper into the field, their pace steady, deliberate. They didn't graze, didn't wander. Every few steps the darker one would lift its head, scanning, then continue forward, as if confirming something only it could sense. The land began to dip slightly, forming a shallow basin ringed with scrub and low brush. Clara's steps slowed. She knew this place. Not by sight alone, but by the way her body reacted to it. The tightness in her chest, the way her hands curled without thinking, the way the air seemed to press harder against her ribs. "Clara?" Mia's voice softened. "What is this place?" Clara stopped walking. The horses didn't. They moved down into the basin, hooves crunching softly against scattered gravel. The lighter one circled once, then twice, before stopping near a rusted metal stake half hidden in the ground. The darker horse stepped beside it, lowering its head, not to graze, not to rest, but to stand, still, watching, waiting. Clara's vision blurred for a moment, not from distance, from something rising too fast inside her. "That shouldn't still be there," she whispered. Mia stepped closer, following Clara's gaze. "What?" Clara didn't point. She didn't need to. Mia saw it now, the stake, the faint line of old wire trailing from it, nearly swallowed by dirt. It looked like nothing, just scrap left behind by time, but Clara stared at it like it was something alive. "Clara, what happened here?" The question landed harder than anything said back at the auction. The wind picked up, brushing through the dry grass with a sound that almost resembled voices, low, distant, unfinished. Clara took a step forward, then another, each one slower than the last. The horses didn't move. They stayed where they were, flanking that rusted point in the earth like sentinels guarding something that didn't belong to the present. Clara stopped just short of it. Her hand lifted slightly, hovering in the air, but she didn't touch the wire. Not yet. "I told myself it was just work," she said, her voice barely above the wind, "that it didn't matter where they came from or where they went after." Mia didn't speak. She didn't need to. The weight in Clara's words was enough. The darker horse shifted one slow step closer to her. Not aggressive, not afraid, just there. As if closing the distance she had spent years creating. Clara swallowed, her throat tight. "This place," she said, forcing the words out, "was one of the holding lines. Temporary, that's what we called it." Mia's breath caught. "Holding? What?" Clara finally looked at her, and for the first time since leaving the auction, there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Not confusion, not defiance. Something closer to recognition. "Not what?" Clara said quietly. "Who?" The wind fell still for a moment. Even the horses didn't move. And in that silence, something long buried began to shift, slow, heavy, and impossible to push back down. Clara lowered her hand, not onto the wire, but to her side, because she already knew. This wasn't the place they were trying to show her. It was only the first one. She exhaled slowly, almost like a surrender. "How many of these?" Mia whispered, looking around the empty basin. Clara didn't answer right away. Her eyes moved past the ridge, further north, where the land stretched out in quiet, broken lines. Then she spoke. "More than I ever went back to count." The darker horse turned its head in that direction. The lighter one followed, and without waiting, they started walking again. Clara didn't hesitate this time. She stepped forward, following them deeper into the land she had spent years pretending she didn't remember. Because whatever truth they were pulling her toward, she had a feeling it wasn't going to stop at one place. They didn't slow down. The land stretched farther than it should have, each rise and dip revealing another piece of ground Clara had trained herself to forget. The wind carried dust in low spirals, brushing past her boots, catching in the horses' manes as they moved with quiet certainty. Mia followed a few steps behind, no longer asking questions. Some answers didn't need to be chased. They came on their own. The second sight was harder to see. No metal stake, no wire left behind, just a long strip of flattened earth, darker than the rest, as if something heavy had pressed into it over and over again. The horses slowed as they reached it, their pace breaking for the first time since leaving the auction. The lighter one stopped first. It lowered its head, not touching the ground, just hovering there, breathing slow, steady, as if listening. The darker one circled once, then twice, tracing the edges of that invisible boundary. Its hooves landed in careful steps, not random, not searching, remembering. Clara's knees weakened. She didn't fall, but she felt it, the pull downward, the weight of something that had been waiting beneath her skin for years. "This was the line," she said, her voice thinner now, stripped of the distance she had held on to before. Mia stepped closer. "What line?" Clara didn't look at her. "The split." The word hung there, short, clean, final. The darker horse stopped its circling and faced Clara directly. Its ears flicked forward, then stilled. The space between them tightened, not with threat, but with something heavier, expectation. Clara drew in a breath that didn't quite fill her lungs. "We brought them in from the ridge," she said. "Whole groups, families. They'd been running together for years, sometimes generations." Her eyes moved across the empty strip of land. "We didn't keep them that way." Mia's fingers curled at her sides. "You separated them." Clara nodded once. "Stallions first, then mares, then whatever was left." She swallowed, her throat tightening around the words. "You couldn't train them if they stayed bonded. That's what they told us." The lighter horse lifted its head slightly. Not startled, not confused, just aware. Clara stepped forward without meaning to, her boots pressing into the same ground where the line had once been drawn. "I remember thinking it was cleaner that way," she continued, "more efficient." A faint, humorless breath left her. "Like we were fixing something wild instead of breaking it." Mia's voice came softer now. "And these two?" Clara's gaze dropped to the earth. "I don't know if they were here that day," she said. "There were too many, too fast." Her hand trembled slightly before she forced it still. "But I know this is where it started." The darker horse moved then, not toward the open field, toward her. It closed the distance in slow, measured steps until it stood just within reach. Close enough that Clara could see the fine lines around its eyes, the small scars hidden beneath its coat. She didn't lift her hand this time. Didn't try to touch it. She just stood there, letting it look at her. Mia watched from behind, her chest tight, her thoughts shifting with every word Clara spoke. This wasn't rescue, not in the way people like to believe in rescue. This was something else, something that had already happened years ago and was only now being faced. "Why now?" Mia asked quietly. "Why come back to this?" Clara didn't answer right away. The wind moved again, softer this time, carrying the faint scent of dry grass and something older beneath it. "Because they didn't stop," she said at last. Mia frowned. "What do you mean?" Clara's eyes flicked briefly toward the horses, then back to the ground. "I thought it would end when the work was done," she said. "You move on. You don't look back. That's how it goes." Her voice dropped lower. "But every time I saw another load come through, every time I watched them get broken down into something easier to handle." She paused. The sentence didn't finish. It didn't need to. Mia felt it anyway. "They stayed with you," she said. Clara gave the smallest nod. "Not all of them," she replied. "Just enough." The darker horse exhaled, a slow release of breath that stirred the dust at its feet. It turned its head slightly, glancing north again, past this place, past the ridge, towards something neither of them could see yet. Clara followed that movement. Her chest tightened again, sharper this time. "There's another one," she said quietly. Mia didn't ask how she knew. She didn't need to. The horses had already begun to move. This time they didn't wait for Clara to catch up. They stepped forward with more urgency, their pace quickening, their bodies leaning into the direction as if whatever lay ahead mattered more than anything they had shown her so far. Clara hesitated, just for a second. Her eyes lingered on the strip of land behind her, the place where the line had been drawn, the place where something had been taken apart and never put back together. Then she turned and followed. Because if this was only the beginning, then whatever waited next wasn't going to be easier to face. And somewhere ahead, beyond the last place she could still pretend not to remember, was the part she had spent years refusing to name. By the time they reached the third stretch of land, the sky had begun to dim. Not from evening, just the kind of fading light that comes when the air turns still and heavy, as if the ground itself is holding its breath. The horses stopped at the edge of a shallow clearing. This place was different, not abandoned, not erased. Something had been built here once, then taken down in pieces. The outline remained, a rough square pressed into the earth, deeper than the rest, marked by posts that had long since been pulled out. But the shape didn't disappear. Clara didn't step forward. She knew this one. Her body knew it before her mind allowed the word to form. "Clara," Mia said carefully, "what is this?" Clara closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. "This," she said, "is where they learn to stop fighting." Mia's chest tightened. "How?" Clara didn't answer immediately. The darker horse moved ahead, stepping into the center of the clearing. It didn't circle this time, didn't pace. It stood still. The lighter one followed, slower, favoring its hind step just slightly, but still choosing to stand beside the other, side by side, facing Clara, waiting. Clara's throat burned. "We called it conditioning," she said, her voice barely steady. "Small space, no escape. You keep them there long enough, take away everything familiar, and eventually they stop trying." Mia felt the words land like weight. "And then?" she asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. Clara's eyes didn't move from the horses. "Then they're easier to sell." Silence fell. Not the quiet of peace. The kind that comes when something too clear has been said and there's no way to soften it after. Behind them, the distant hum of an engine cut through the stillness. Clara didn't turn. She didn't need to. "They followed us," Mia whispered, glancing back toward the ridge. 2 trucks crested the hill, tires grinding over dirt and rock. Dust lifted behind them, slow and deliberate, like a warning that had finally arrived. The program hadn't let go, not yet. The trucks rolled closer, stopping just beyond the clearing. Doors opened. Boots hit the ground. Men stepped out, quiet, efficient, practiced. Clara recognized one of them. Didn't need to hear his name to know what he'd come for. "You've made this harder than it had to be," he said, walking forward, gaze fixed on the horses. "They're tagged, registered. You don't get to decide otherwise." Clara stood still. For the first time since leaving the auction, she felt the old instinct rise, the one that said, "Step aside, let it happen, don't complicate what's already been set in motion." It had worked for years, it had made everything easier. Mia stepped closer to her. "Clara!" But Clara didn't move. Her eyes stayed on the horses. On the way they stood, not running, not resisting, not reacting to the men approaching, just standing. Together, exactly where they had chosen to be. "They already decided," Clara said quietly. The man frowned. "What does that even mean?" Clara finally turned, not toward Mia, not toward the trucks, toward him, and toward the space behind him, where more people had begun to gather. Word had traveled faster than anyone expected. A few from the auction, a few from town. Even Caleb stood there now, watching with that same tight smile, waiting to see how far she would go. Clara took a breath, slow, deep. Then she spoke, not just to the man in front of her, but to everyone who had followed. "I helped build this," she said. The clearing seemed to shrink around the words. "I signed off on the contracts. I stood right here while they were brought in." Her voice didn't shake this time. It didn't need to. "I told myself it was work, that it was necessary." No one interrupted. No one moved. Clara gestured toward the ground. "This is where we broke them," she said, "not because they were dangerous, because they didn't belong to anyone yet." The wind shifted, carrying her voice further than she expected. Mia felt her chest tighten. Caleb's expression changed, just slightly. The smile faded, replaced by something more cautious. "You're saying you were part of it?" someone in the crowd asked. Clara nodded. "Yes." The word landed heavier than anything else she could have said. "And now," the man from the truck pressed, "now you think buying 2 of them changes that?" Clara looked at the horses again, at the way they hadn't moved, at the way they had led her here, not to prove something, not to accuse, but to show her. "No," she said. Then she reached into her coat and pulled out a folded set of papers. Her hand didn't tremble, not anymore. "It doesn't change it," she continued, "but it stops me from pretending I didn't know what I was doing." She stepped forward, closing the distance between herself and the man, and handed him the papers. He took them, confused, unfolding them slowly. "What is this?" "Transfer," Clara said. "The land, what's left of it." Mia's breath caught. "Clara?" Clara didn't look at her. "Not to me," she said. "Not to anyone here." Her voice softened slightly, but the weight didn't lift. "It's registered as protected ground. No holding, no processing, no sales." The man's eyes moved quickly across the page, then stopped. "You're giving it up?" he asked. Clara nodded once. "It was never mine to use the way I did." Silence pressed in from every side. Caleb stepped forward slightly. "You're walking away from everything," he said, disbelief edging into his voice now. "For this?" Clara met his gaze. "For what I didn't walk away from before." The horses shifted. Not in fear, not in reaction to the people, but as if something had finally settled. The darker one lowered its head slightly, the tension in its body easing for the first time since they had left the trailer. The lighter one stepped closer to Clara, just enough for their shoulders to almost touch. Clara didn't reach out. She didn't need to. The wind moved again, softer now, and for a moment no one spoke, because there was nothing left to argue, nothing left to explain, only the space where a decision had been made, and the cost of it standing in plain sight. No one stopped her. Not when the papers were signed. Not when the men folded them back into stiff envelopes, their voices lower now, stripped of the certainty they had arrived with. The trucks didn't leave immediately, but something had shifted. The purpose that brought them here no longer held. Clara stepped away from the clearing first, not as someone retreating, but as someone stepping out of a place that had already taken enough from her. Mia followed in silence. Behind them, the small crowd lingered, unsure whether to speak, to question, or simply to stand witness to something they hadn't expected to see. Even Caleb said nothing this time. His hands rested at his sides, the argument he had carried here left with nowhere to land. The horses didn't move right away. They remained where they were, inside that empty square of ground, until Clara had put several steps between them. Then, quietly, almost imperceptibly, they began to follow. Not close, not far, just enough to remain within reach of her presence without closing the distance completely, as if the space between them mattered now. They walked back across the uneven land, the wind easing, the light softening as the day slipped toward evening. The broken fence came into view again, then the long stretch of field beyond it. Clara didn't look back. Not at the clearing, not at the people, not at what had been said. She kept her eyes forward, focused on the open ground ahead, the same direction the horses had chosen when they first stepped away from the trailer. Only now there was no rope, no handler, no claim. When they reached the edge of her land, the last boundary still marked by weathered posts and half-fallen wire, Clara slowed, then stopped. Mia stepped beside her, glancing between Clara and the horses. What happens now? Clara let the question sit for a moment. The land in front of them stretched outward, unmarked, untouched. No fences strong enough to hold anything, no structures left to define what belonged where. She exhaled slowly. "They don't stay," she said. Mia blinked. "After everything, you're not keeping them?" Clara shook her head. "I was never supposed to." The darker horse lifted its head, ears forward, watching her. The lighter one shifted its weight, stepping closer, but not crossing the invisible line where Clara stood. For a moment, it felt like the world had narrowed to that single space. Clara reached out, not fully, not the way she might have once, but just enough for her fingers to brush the air between them. Close, but not contact. "I took enough already," she said quietly. "This part isn't mine." The wind moved through the grass, carrying a softer sound now, not empty, not sharp, just open. The darker horse turned first. A slow, deliberate movement, its body angling toward the wide stretch of land beyond. The lighter one followed, hesitating for a heartbeat longer before stepping in the same direction. They didn't run, didn't bolt. They walked, each step steady, unhurried, as if the choice didn't need to be rushed. Mia watched, her chest tightening in a way she couldn't quite name. "They're leaving." Clara nodded. Her eyes stayed on them. "I know." The horses reached the rise just beyond the fence line. For a moment, both paused. The darker one turned its head slightly, not fully back, not a call, not a question, just enough to see her. Then it faced forward again, and kept walking. The lighter one followed without looking back. The space they left behind didn't feel empty. It felt finished. Mia let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "I thought they would stay." Clara's lips moved slightly, not quite a smile. "They already did," she said. Mia looked at her, confusion flickering across her face, but Clara didn't explain. She didn't need to. They stood there until the shapes of the horses blurred into the distance, their outlines softening against the fading light. Only when they were gone, truly gone, did Clara turn away. The land behind her was quiet. No voices, no engines, no weight pressing in from every direction. Just the slow, steady rhythm of wind moving through open ground. Mia walked beside her as they headed back, neither of them speaking for a while. At the edge of the field, Mia finally asked, her voice softer now, careful, "Do you regret it?" Clara didn't answer right away. Her gaze moved across the land, over the broken fence, the worn paths, the places that no longer held what they once did. Then she looked forward again. "No," she said. A pause, then more quietly, "I regret that it took this long." They kept walking. Not toward the house, that was no longer hers, not toward the clearing, that belonged to something else now, just forward, into whatever came next. And for the first time in years, Clara didn't feel like she was leaving something behind. She felt like she had finally stopped carrying it. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't saving something, it's giving up the right to hold it. Clara didn't win anything back, but she chose truth over comfort and responsibility over silence. And maybe that's what real redemption looks like. If this story stayed with you, there are more waiting, quiet, human, and worth hearing.
If this story meant something to you, share your thoughts below and follow Horse Heart Healing for more stories like this.